Hello everyone, welcome to today's live book reading session of Ask Better Questions by Dr. Kirsten Lee Hill. Kirsten has presented us about how to do research earlier days, a few months ago. Today she's back with us. We are thrilled to have her with us, who will guide us to teach us how to create impactful surveys. So she has written a book called Ask Better Questions, and we are going to read through this session and we are going to learn from her. A little background about Kirsten. She's an accomplished researcher and consultant specializing in survey design and data driven storytelling. She holds a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania and bring over a decade of experience working with nonprofit startups and small businesses, including organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, New York City Public Schools, to name a few. Kirsten, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We are eager to learn from you in creating better surveys. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, Wilson. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I am really excited to talk about my book. I am like sitting by like 100 author copies of it right now. This whole office is filled with it. And to start, I just wanted to share a little bit about why I wrote this book in the first place. There are lots of survey design books out there. If you go on Amazon or Google, there are tons. And one of the things that really struck me about them is that they are wildly expensive. Like they're full-on textbooks that you're paying 50, 100. Some of the books are like way over $100 for. And I was like, that's interesting. Like that makes survey design pretty accessible at that inaccessible at that price point. And then when you dive into them and like learn from them, which, as Wilson mentioned, I have a PhD. I went to school and took all the courses and read the traditional survey textbooks. They're very heavy and long and detailed and just such a challenging starting place for survey design. And I felt they just really overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be that hard. So when I sat down to write Ask Better Questions, it was actually because I was writing a book on how to do research, and the survey section just kept getting like more detailed than the other sections. And I was like, I should just take it. I'll make it its own book just on survey design. So I split it out and really focused on giving people a step-by-step guide that like anyone, like if you've never done a survey in your life, you can pick it up and use it. But also if you've done surveys for a really long time and just want a refresher on like how to do it well, it works for you too. So the book is divided up into two parts. I kind of split it into like getting started with survey design. The second half is on doing the pilot test of your survey, because I think that's like one of the most important overlooked steps of survey design. And how do you do analysis and reporting? And that part was kind of just like a fun extra to put in. People don't always get into analysis when you talk about survey design, but if you write these awesome questions and you get all of this good data, like, don't you want to do something with it, right? So, like, you need to know a little bit about the different types of analysis that you have as an option available to you, and how do you put it together, and what is it important to share with people when you're sharing your data? That's another one of those steps that I see where I'm like, gosh, like everyone's reporting these like percentages and survey results, and they don't tell you anything about where they came from. And I'm like, but who took the survey? Like what questions did you ask? How many people were they? What characteristics did they have? And that's stuff that gets overlooked and is really, really important. So it's split into two parts and is just designed both parts to be super, super simple. And it's only 9 steps, and you could go through step by step and like start at the beginning and design a survey. You could read the whole thing and go back and design a survey, but I really designed it to be kind of modular, right? So at the end of each step, it gives you something to do to break down the survey writing process. And I think honestly, even in my work now, I've been designing surveys for like close to 15 years now. And like I still go through the same steps. And today I just wanted to highlight a little like some of the steps. I think to me, like my two favorite steps are probably like step 4 and 5 because they're like most unexpected. Step 4 is to literally just like draft your survey. So like sit down and just do it. Once you know your goals, once you know what you like why you're asking this and who you want to ask the questions of, just sit down and do it. I think there are two schools of thoughts, and one is that you learn everything you can about survey design and like you just have it all in your head and you translate it into like the most perfect survey. So like as you're writing, you have to be thinking about all of the best practices. And that's how I learned to design surveys. And I hate that way because it's so slow. You have to have so many things in your head and be thinking about like, well, this is what I want to learn and this is the best way to ask it, but I also have to use this rule over here. And I find that that can really get people very stuck in survey design because you're trying to balance your needs and best practices all at the same time. So I don't like that way. So my approach is more just draft or survey, and it can be like terrible. It can be completely terrible. The only goal when you draft your first survey is to make sure that it is capturing all the things you want to know. Like, make sure you're asking about everything that you want to learn about for your survey. And after you do that, step 5 is like a checklist to apply to your questions to make sure they're great. And I like truly, truly believe if you use the checklist, even if your first questions are like just complete garbage, like they will be fine. Like they will be good. You can improve them. And I think just flipping the ordering of doing those things is so helpful and will help you to go faster, to help you feel more like confident as you're writing because you don't have to have everything in your head and have all the best practices memorized and translate them perfectly. Instead, you have the freedom to like explore, like dream big about all the questions that you want to ask and then apply like a sensible framework to review them and make sure that they are actually good. And I think that that is helpful, and I hope that people who follow that process and read the book find that helpful. The other thing that the book has a lot of, which I'm happy to share some of these with you today, is examples from the real world. So I have a folder on my phone that I call the question makeover folder, and it has hundreds of screenshots of surveys that I have been sent that pop up on the internet. And I took like the best of the best in terms of examples and put them in the book and show like these are like big companies like Apple's in the book, Qualtrics is in the book, the Weather Channel's in the book, like major companies that have lots of resources launch bad surveys every day, like sometimes multiple times a day. And so we go through these examples and say, this is how they're asking it, these are the reasons why this is bad, and like here's how you should ask it instead. And I think that that is a helpful framework for reviewing things. I like to say that like bad survey design is a problem that like nobody knows they have until someone points it out, right? Like a lot of people, a lot of company go through their organizational lifespan thinking they're asking really great questions, and then suddenly they're on a call with me or someone like me, and we're like, huh, like, why are you doing it that way? Like that's not going to get you good data. And then suddenly the whole thing just like unravels, right? But if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're looking for. So it's challenging to make improvements. So I think having these real world examples is really helpful and fun. And I'm a big fan of like learning by doing. So I think that that's a good way to do it. And I actually pulled one up that I could show you. This is from, I don't know, we'll send you to Raja might remember this. This is from my last block survey presentation, but this is a very popular question. It is featured in the book. And people always want to know how people heard about them, which I understand. Like, that's an important question for marketing. You want to know what channels are working for you. I joke that I get some variation of this question like at least once a day, and no one's ever doing it particularly well. But when you first look at this, like this seems like pretty much okay. Like Quoted is a organization that connects reporters to experts so that they can write stories and people want to know how you heard about it. And it's like, it could have been online, it could have been through a colleague, could have been through an email, could have been through social media, could have been events. They even have an other, which is like great. They're like, or you could have heard about us from somewhere else. But to me, when I look at that, I see just like so many problems, right? Like for online advertising and email and social media, those are what we call like overlapping answer choices, right? Like social media is online. So if you hear about something online, it could be social media. Social media has ads, social media has organic reach. So if you saw it on a LinkedIn ad, are you in the advertising box or are you in the LinkedIn box, right? Like there's too much overlap to get good information there. And like the biggest issue here really is the fact that they've grouped all of social media together. If any of you are market researchers or have a company, knowing that social media is working for you overall is very not helpful because now do you spend more money on Facebook or do you spend more money on LinkedIn? You don't know because you just know, oh, a bunch of people are coming from social media. That doesn't help you make any decisions, right? And that's the lens through which I view like good survey design is if you can't use the data to take action, you have not designed it well, right? And like this is too messy, too muddy to take action. So one of the things we talk about in the book is like needing to split things up. And like really that one question could be like five questions, right? But splitting things up, being more specific. If someone clicks ad, then drilling down to what channel. If someone clicked social media, then drilling down to what channel. Also, like switching from here, this is like a common convention in surveys, but like circle means you can only pick one thing, square means you can pick as many things as you want. Like, what if I heard about you through three different channels? I can only tell you one, right? And then you're missing the full picture of like, oh, wow, people are actually hearing about us through Google search, and they're hearing about us through our newsletter, and they're hearing about us through social media. And all of that would be helpful information, right? So this is just one example. There's 13 other ones in the book, and I do a newsletter every week that's kind of been like a continuation of the book where I feature survey questions I find in the wild, I say every week, and go through the review of how to make them better. Um, so yeah, so like the focus is really just on getting clear on your goals, drafting, and just kind of like going wild for the whole first half. You can like really do whatever you want as long as you're focusing on your goals and your purpose. And then once you have that, applying like, I wouldn't say a strict process, a clear process for like, okay, like do these questions make sense? Am I including the right answer choices? Are people going to know what this means? I love the like, should everyone even see this question? I got a branding survey the other day on Instagram asking if I'd recommend a company and I never heard of the company. And I'm like, why are you even giving me this survey question? And then why are you giving it to me without an option to say, I've never heard of you? Right? Like it's just thinking through like what are all the ways this question could go wrong and how do I fix it? Um, so I say that part one is like the most content like intense part of the book, and then part two, when we get into analysis, I'd say people usually find that part the most like challenging, just in terms of like diving into things like descriptive statistics and correlations and statistical significance and things that like a lot of times just like make people's eyes glaze over. But I've tried really hard to explain them in a very simple, overly simplified way, so that you would be able to use them immediately to unpack your data and write up a report. So I'd love to just open it up to you all if you have any questions about survey design. I'm happy to answer them. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about the book. I think Wilson put the link in the chat. It's the cheapest survey design book you can buy. It's $9.99 on Kindle. I think it's $19.99 in print because it's expensive to print things, which is it's just, fun thing I learned. Um, But yeah, I'd love to open it up and answer any questions, or I'm happy to go into more examples if that would be helpful as well. For data and write up a report. So I'd love to just open it up to you all if you have any questions about survey design. I'm happy to answer them. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about the book. I think Wilson put the link in the chat. It's the cheapest survey design book you can buy. It's $9.99 on Kindle. I think it's $19.99 in print because it's expensive to print things, which is it's just, fun thing I learned. Um, but yeah, I'd love to open it up and answer any questions, or I'm happy to go into more examples if that would be helpful as well.
Thank you, Kirsten. Kirsten, I just wanted to, I think at the beginning of the book, you touch upon the role of IRB, the
Oh
review board. I'm just curious to know, are they relevant today for all the public surveys people are circulating? I think so I see social research is continuing to take place, right? I've seen Reddit is flooded with a lot of surveys out there. There's also a thriving community in Facebook and then in Reddit, and also people are also creating forums to do research. So I just wanted
yeah,
to hear about, are they relevant today? How
yeah,
should individuals be mindful with respect to the ethical standards in research?
yeah. So, oh, I love talking about IRBs, Wilson. So to me, and I talk about this in the book, there is like, I call it like big R research, like research with a capital R, and then there is like research with like a lowercase r. And I think one of the challenges today is that everyone says they're doing research, but they mean it more like casually. Like market research is a great example. Market research does not go through an IRB because while it is called research, it's really more an evaluation. So, like here, we make the distinction between research and evaluation. And if you're doing an evaluation, you're collecting information because you want to like better your company, improve your product, like you're really using it internally. And if you're doing research, it's because you want to like contribute to the field or like improve society or like generalize to other groups. And so it's technically, people ignore this all the time, but it's technically pretty strict. Where like if you are doing research, you have to have institutional oversight. And like a board might review it and be like, this is like so low lift, not at risk of hurting anyone, like free pass. But I turn down projects all the time where I'm like, if we're not going through an IRB, like I don't want to touch it because this is research. You're trying to impact the field. It's not evaluation where you're just learning for yourself. So I think that's like the first really important question to
Mhm.
ask yourself is like, why am I getting this information? Like, is it because I want to like, I mean, an academic journal won't publish you if you haven't been through an IRB, right? Like, is it
Mhm.
because um, I want to go like a more academic route, or because I want to say like, this applies to the entire field or this applies to all people, or is it really like it's my organization and I want to learn about it and like that's fine. But I will say also to your point, Wilson, I feel like no matter which route you go, you should follow the same best practices. Like IRBs were created because people did really shady stuff to people in studies. They lied to them, they took advantage of them. Like that's why we ended up having oversight in the first place. And I think with surveys in particular, a lot of times, I mean, you look at the ones that scroll up on Instagram or TikTok, and they give no context about like why are you asking me. I mean, this is like block survey privacy, right? Like why are you asking me for my data? What are you going to do with my data? To me, those things which are required by IRBs should actually just be done by everyone. Like if you're asking people to give them information, tell them why. Like I'm collecting this because I want to be able to do this thing with it, and I'm going to share it in a report, or I'm going to use it in marketing materials. I think that that kind of disclosure is really important, even if it's just like, I'm always like, just a survey on Instagram, but I'm like, but still, like, you're asking people to give you information, like give them the opportunity to truly like consent to say like, yeah, it's okay if you share this with someone. I think a lot of times about a conference that I was at and I filled out the survey thinking it was anonymous. And the head of the conference came up to talk to me about my feedback. And I was like so panicked because I hadn't realized that, like, one, they would know it was me that took the survey. I didn't realize how they were going to use the data. And I was just like, this is my nightmare, right? And I just think, like, that's why there's IRBs, right? Because an IRB would never let you do that. And I think that other organizations should follow suit, right? Where it's like, hey, it's not anonymous. I'm totally going to know that you said this, and I might talk to you about it. Like I'm answering the survey very differently, right? So I think that that type of like full disclosure is
Mm.
helpful. And on the flip side, if it is anonymous and you'll never know who said what, that can buy so much trust and comfort with people, right? Because they're like, oh, like I just did a survey for a pretty big school district and people were nervous about taking the survey. They were like, I'm not sure it's really going to be anonymous. I don't want to get in trouble. And like that's a major issue, right? Because then you have low response rates. No one wants to take it. People are saying positive things even though they don't think them. So I think that that disclosure and thinking about privacy upfront is so important.
Thank you, Kirsten. In one of the chapters, you speak about community coming together to share their questionnaire, right? So many a times today, if we start a survey to crafting questions, we always look, maybe either we Google it or we right now we maybe using ChatGPT, or you also gave a tip with respect to how you can look into Google Images, right? Images or
Yeah.
PDFs out there might be validated questions, right? Questions that are crafted well and you can reuse them, right? So provided you ask them consent and then you get permissions and then you start using them. Just wanted to know, are there open source like questionnaires are available, like question banks or people coming together to create it? How do you see it with now AI is there? I'm not
Yeah.
sure about the credibility of those questions with respect to what is their
Yeah.
references, right? There are not no citations there with respect to how they have reason to get these questions. So if you could touch
Yeah.
on this topic, it'll be interesting.
I mean, I think for sure, like researchers, I mean, like myself, are nervous about the AI aspect of things just because I mean, on the surface, it looks great at creating questions, but when you dive deeper, I always tell people, I'm like, like ChatGPT was trained on like the internet. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know how many, like the proportion of like good responses to bad, like survey things on the internet? I'm like, it's been trained on like pretty bad survey data, right? So I think when you get things from something like ChatGPT, you have to really consider that you're going to need to revise it heavily, right? It's just more that you can't take it as it is. Um, I'm going to put one in the chat. I think this one's really interesting. Stanford has a bank of survey questions that they use for, this is like more in the social impact space, but I think it's just like so fascinating. Um, can I put it in? I'm like, where did my chat button go? Y'all, I am like not always the best with I'm gonna share my screen, Wilson, and maybe you can steal it. It's called Spark Tools. Oh wait, I got it. Huh. Look at me. Okay. It's called Spark Tools. Stanford. I just think it's such an interesting database. And these are all like validated tools that measure super specific things. And there are similar banks like this from a lot of universities. Um, And honestly, like I get in Google Scholar all the time just because I'm curious, like what validated measures are out there. And like whatever I want to measure, like even if it's customer feedback, I'll be like customer feedback plus like validated survey because I just kind of want to see what's going on. Um, but one thing I would like caution people against is that like I like to use these as like inspiration, kind of like what you said, like I'll go on Google Images and just like scroll through different surveys to be like, how are they asking this? Like what type of response choices do they use? But I don't put that much stock in the fact that it's a great tool. Like a lot of surveys were developed like 10, 20 plus years ago, and they're validated, which just means like the math on them looks good, right? But they might not be following like common sense practices. An issue I see a lot is like surveys that use really advanced language and like I'm like, do people even know what this word means in this survey?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I would want to change it, like it's a little confusing. So I really love using existing surveys as like inspiration. I've never like just sent out someone else's surveys. And to your point, like you can. Some people, it's usually pretty clear like if you have to go through a paywall, you can't send it out, right?
Right.
Because they're putting it behind a paywall. But most people will say like you're allowed to use this, you're allowed to change it, like it's under the Creative Commons license or whatever. But I've never taken anything as is and sent it out because I think that the goals and determining what you want to learn should really drive the questions. And like there's just not good odds that someone wants to learn exactly what you want to learn from the exact same group of people. So to me, the value is much more in seeing like more creatively, like what is out there and how are people thinking about this rather than being like, oh, and I'm just going to take these like 10 questions. I think the exception would be in a lot of like psychology research, like if you're doing like market research and including psychology, you might want to pull a validated psychology scale because that's like the standard and you can show that you use the standard. But generally, I wish people felt more empowered to be more creative in their survey design because a lot of what we have out there is it's old. It's like kind of tired.
Got- Thank you, Kirsten. I think when you touched upon the word choices, right? I think contextually, based on the audience, how we have to use the right words. So in your book, you have highlighted words like belonging doesn't
Yeah.
resonate with students or kids, right? So uh, yeah, specifically kids who are very young, they may not know what does belonging really mean. So these are very heavy, overloaded words, right?
Yeah.
In customer surveys or in employee surveys or in public surveys, you have seen. I know you have reviewed tons of surveys over and over again. I've seen your TikTok. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know, do you see any catchphrases or cliche words which are overused?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, generally, this is like not even that hard of a word, but like satisfaction is everywhere, and it is one of my least favorite words to see on a survey. I think satisfaction is so overly general. So if you don't anchor it and like being satisfied about like a specific component, it's always like general satisfaction, general satisfaction. I'm like, what do you do with that? Right? Like it's just ChatGPT loves to spin up surveys with how satisfied are you? How satisfied are you? And I'm like, I just don't see that as like particularly useful. And also, people can have different definitions of satisfaction, right? Like it just, I think that confounds it a little bit. Even words, honestly, like putting in like words like customers. I'm like, I don't know. Like, why are you saying customers instead of like people who bought something from us, right? Or like people who work for us instead of clients? I think in the US in particular, there are so many different languages that people speak and like levels of proficiency with English in a lot of populations that it's like, why not just pick the most basic response? And I think some people are like, that's so silly. Like everyone knows what employee experience refers to, right? Or everyone knows customer experience, or everyone knows like representative. And I'm like, I've been in rooms where that's not true, right? And like how does it hurt you to just say it a little bit more simply, right? Like you don't actually lose anything by making it more simple for more people to understand. I think to me, I'm always like, sure, like I know like big words too, but it's not necessarily that they need a place in surveys, right? There's been a lot of surveys recently about AI, and they always refer to it as like generative AI. And I'm like, I think that's such a good example because I think people are like, ooh, is ChatGPT generative AI? You know what I mean? Like I'm like, I don't people don't know, or like LLMs. And it's like, what is an LLM? And I'm like, this is the problem, right? Like you
Mhm.
really do have to. I remember the first survey I took where I was like, I don't actually know what this means. And it was about ad tracking, which like, I was like, what is ad tracking? I'm like, they're asking if I would be okay with ad tracking. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like now, and I'm like, I'm pretty educated. I'm like, is this like ads on the internet? This was a couple years ago when ad tracking had like just started and Apple was like, we're privacy first, no ad tracking.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like there are things that because you're in that field or around it every day, it's like, oh, this is a totally normal word. Everyone knows it. And then like the minute you get outside your circle, people are like, I don't get it. I love the belonging example you shared, Wilson, because that was like one of my most traumatizing moments as a researcher was I was working in a school and we were administering a survey and it had the belonging scale on it. And like I've used the belonging scale. I've worked at multiple districts that use the belonging scale. And I'm sitting in the room while the kids are taking the survey, and three kids walked up to me to ask me what belonging was. And I just remember thinking, like, oh God, I was like, this survey goes out multiple times a year to like hundreds of thousands of kids. And people
Okay.
are like, belonging's so important. It predicts so many things. And I'm like, I just got asked by three kids in the span of 5 minutes what it even means. And like, that's
Mhm.
terrifying for someone who does stuff
Yeah.
like that. Okay,
Is
gosh.
that also a problem I've seen with uh, when we roll out a survey, right? I think it has to be really precise, correct? So every question, it has to be rightly worded. I think there's no taking back, correct? And also it feels like one-way street for or an audience or a respondent to give you the data. They cannot even have communication or talk to you, correct? So do you see a role of AI coming there? So if they don't understand a question, they can clarify the question then and write there more like a conversation and then assistant for them to go ahead and fill the survey.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was actually thinking about like more chat bot surveys this morning because I was like, I think they're so interesting because you could ask clarifying questions, which I like, but I worry a little bit about them taking longer, right? And I'm like, and I'm just not sure where I land on it yet, right? I almost would like prefer the like helper text. You know what I mean? Where it's like if it has a word that needs to be defined and you hover over it and it like tells you. You know what I mean? Or I guess maybe if it had like a separate assistant on the side that you could ask questions to. I think people want to get through things so fast. So there's this trade-off between like conversational surveys, which I think feel better because it's more natural, but also take longer because it's a conversation, right?
Mhm.
And so I've been thinking, I think in different spaces, I this morning I literally woke up thinking about this morning and I was just like, oh, like in market research, I'm like, I could see the chat, like people loving a more like conversational survey, and it could, like, if people were confused about part of the product, you could follow up and things like that. And I'm like, but in like more like social science research space or like evaluation space, I'm like, it would be the surveys would be so long. It would take so long for people to get through all the questions that we want to do. So I think there are a lot of like interesting trade-offs, but any way that you can like have a help or something would be like great as backup. But to me, like first line of defense would be like just don't ask a confusing, right? Like
Yes.
use a different word or give an
Yeah.
example, right? I think that with the AI thing, I'm like if you put in parentheses like ChatGPT or like Google Gemini, right? Like then suddenly people are like, oh, like that's what this means. And like that can be just as useful as like coming up with a simpler term.
Sure. Thank you, Kirsten. There's a
Yeah.
question from the chat. Raja has a question. This is about breaking down complex questions into smaller, more specific ones for better clarity. If we do this, the number of questions do increase in the survey. How do we
Mhm.
approach this situation? What are the best practices to follow?
So I tell people a lot, I'm generally not concerned with how many questions you have. I'm concerned with how long they take to answer,
Mhm.
right? So we actually had an interesting rule when we were surveying students, and we were like, it can't take more than 3 minutes right? So I'm like, it can only take 3 minutes for people to go through this survey. That's the only amount of time we're giving them. And that's a different thing than saying like, oh, like we're only going to ask 5 questions. And so I think it's important to separate like number of questions and time to complete. Because if you're asking really simple, straightforward questions, I might be able to answer like 10 in 2 minutes. And like that's not really a big deal. Whereas if your questions are more complicated, and it's taking me like 15 minutes to answer 4 of them. Like, like it's like we confound number of questions with like time to complete when in reality, like two separate things. So that's one of the reasons I really love testing surveys. I had a survey the other day and someone was like, we should put that this is going to take like 15 minutes to complete. There's so many questions. And I was like, it doesn't take 15 minutes to complete. And so they took it and they're like, oh my God, it only took me 4 minutes. And I'm like, right. Because if you design it well and like have it like visually appealing and easy to flow through, it just goes really quickly and you can get in more questions like without people realizing. So I think like when you get more specific and you know you're going to have more questions, that where is where it becomes really important to think about like the user interface. I hate numbering questions on surveys, for instance, because I feel like then people are like, oh, I'm on like number 16. But I'm like, but if it only took you like 4 minutes to get there, like, who cares that you're on number 16? Like, I don't need to draw attention to the fact that you're on number 16. Like, I'd rather draw attention to the progress bar that says like you're almost done, right? So I think you have to think
Mm.
strategically about like what people are seeing. Um, so I'm like all get as specific as possible, but also I think you have to be like very diligent to not ask too many things that you won't actually use, right? Some people I
Mm.
think get a little like question happy and I'm like, okay, but we have like 17 questions. A lot of them kind of ask the same thing, like, do we really need all of these, right? Or like, do you really need like this level of specificity, right? Like maybe you only need to ask like 2 of those 5 questions. So I think part of it is to be really on top of like, this is like a firm, concise set of things that I need to know the answers to, and I'm going to use this data. And then additionally, thinking about what it's going to look like on the user end. I think if more people took their own surveys, surveys would look very different. I think a lot of people, there's no way anyone ever tested this because if they had gone through it even once, I think they would have realized like, oh, this is weird. Like this doesn't feel right, you know?
Got it. Yeah. I think it makes sense to see it case by case, right? And this is something you also you have covered on the book with respect to the review process, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the 5 steps what you talk about, I think one of the second step is about create craft questions with respect to what you're going to measure. I
Yep.
so you, and you also touch upon, okay, keep a minimum of 3 to 5 measures or
Yeah.
3 to 5 goals, not more than that, and ask questions only towards that. But then when we think about sometimes, okay, we are doing a survey, let's add one more measure, right? Just to ensure that, okay, let's get the maximum of
Yeah.
in one survey, can we get the maximum? So I think it's the balance, like you said. I think if we go keep that mental model with respect to what we are going to measure, we have to eliminate all the other questions which are not part of the goal.
Yeah. Because I think like to your point, people are like, oh, we only get this one chance to survey, like put everything in it. But like people can quit your survey anytime they want, right? So if
Mm.
suddenly it does get too long, it's like expect people to drop off. Like it would almost be better to design a really tight survey and then do a second one later because people are like, oh, the last one was like so short and easy to go through. Like, I'm happy to do another one, right? Versus like burning all of your goodwill on like one super long survey. People are like, I'm never touching
Mm. Got
that.
it.
Um,
There's one more question in the chat from Brendan.
yes. So I think again, like I'm torn on this, right? Like I think it depends on the type of data you want from a survey, right? And I think like the best way I can explain this is like surveys were initially created because you people wanted to do systematic data collection on a large level, right? So like they wanted to collect the exact same information from a bunch of different people. So if you switch that to conversational, it's a little bit different because suddenly you're not like following a protocol to collect the same amount of information from every single people because everyone goes down a slightly different path based on where their conversation went. And from a researcher standpoint, that makes me nervous because I'm like, now, did this person not mention that because like it wasn't an issue or like it wasn't important to them, or is it because their conversational path like didn't go down that way? So I really think it depends on like what your goals are for the data and how you're going to use it. Because I mean, you think about like how many people do interview design, it's the same thing, right? If you do an unstructured interview, you're just not guaranteeing that you get the same buckets of information from everyone, which is okay in some instances. Lots of studies do that approach. But for me, like I think about like when I'm surveying, I want the exact same feedback like from everyone on all the things. So I can say like, I asked these 20 people about these exact five things. I followed up on these things, and like this is like what the system looks like. And I think that's just like very different than a goal where you are okay with like conversational data and the fact that like some things might come up and some things might not come up for other people. So I think it's really driven by the goals. And I think it's a cool technology to be able to have conversations because I think there's definitely a role for it. But I don't see like more traditional survey structures going away completely. Maybe they end up only in certain fields, but I'm like, I think a lot of quantitative researchers in particular are like, we're not gonna like measure, anxiety or depression or like any of the psychological factors like based on a conversation because we want a clear score that's consistent across all of these people and we can validate it and measure it over time. Um, Even if you just looked at like the like nerdy analytic parts of survey research, like you can't generate the same stats out of qualitative data as you can quantitative, and people lean one way or the other. So I think it'll just be two like interconnected fields that like serve different roles.
Thank you.
Yeah. Increase quality, exhibition. Well, is that for like the conversational surveys or for any survey? I'd say generally, people love to put in like almost like fake outs in surveys or like checks for attention, right? To see if people are like, going through and just clicking agree to everything and like changing things up. Um, to check to see if people are like really engaged in participating. To me, this is kind of like old school, but I really think like the best way to get good survey data is to have people invested in giving you good survey data, right? Like if, I don't know, if my favorite restaurant wanted me to take a survey about like their food and what I want more of or what times I wish they were open, like I'm motivated to participate because like I want to see certain changes, right? Like if I can see the value of me participating and I know you're going to use the data, like that increases quality participation. I think you run into subpar communication when people aren't really sure why you're asking them for things and they have no faith that you will actually use it. So like it doesn't matter. I get nervous all the time on TikTok whenever I do a video reviewing a survey, people are like, some people have fun just like screwing with survey data. They're like, oh, I just always click this to mess with people's data. And I'm like, oh my God, like, why would you do that? And it's because it's like people are targeting the wrong people. I'm like, you want to target people who want to like give you feedback, good or bad, right? Or if people are reluctant, I talk about incentives in the book, you want to incentivize people to participate. I think one of the biggest differences between like well-funded research and like other research is like we pay people like 50, $100 to take our surveys. And it's like, that's an incentive, right? Like you're getting a financial incentive and I'm telling you how I'm going to use the data. Like I think that the best quality comes from people having trust that you are going to do something with the information, that their like response actually matters and means something. And so a lot of times I'll tell people it's like the first survey you do, like the biggest goal should make sure like people have a good experience. You explicitly like reach out and like say like, hey, like we made all of these changes because of the survey. I was like, because that doesn't help you at all on the first survey. I'm like, but it helps you on the second survey, right? Like if the first survey, no one ever hears from you again, they have no idea if you did anything with their information, now your quality of participation on the second survey is going way down, right? Because it's like, this like this again. Maybe I fill it out, but I'm like, I know nothing's going to happen. It's just you get very different quality of responses when people have faith that you're going to actually do something with it. I had a meeting last night. Sometimes we do like focus groups after survey. So like we've done the survey, we have the main findings, and like now we want to meet with the people who took the survey to discuss it. And there were a couple people who were like, if I had known that you were going to like do something with the data, like I would have like filled out the whole thing. And I'm like, right, like this is like an institutional problem because they've been surveyed so many times by this organization that they've lost like all faith that it even matters or that anything's going to happen with it at all. And now they're like, oh, wait, but you do care what we think. So like, could I take the survey again? You know what I mean? Or like, are you going to do this again? And I'm like, surveying is such a relationship with people. So I think it's important to respect people's time and like really demonstrate that the information is valuable. And it is, because if it wasn't, you shouldn't be doing a survey to get it.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten. That's a good answer. I see your approach with respect, which means when we roll out the survey, if we communicate the purpose with respect to how we are going to act on the data upfront,
Yeah.
that could also drive participation, right? I think just clearly
100%.
communicating it.
Yeah.
And you touched upon incentives. What else could be other ways, Kirsten? So incentives, so
Yeah.
communication, we are going to act on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think so, like clear purpose, right? So it's like, this is why you are taking the survey, and like, these are the things you're going to be asked. Like, I think like information always helps, right? Like, if I know what's going to happen going in, my response, like, I'm more likely to respond because I have a clear picture. I'm like, you share how long it's going to take, you share
Mhm.
the types of things you're asking about, you explain why it's important, like, that kind of like sets you up for success. With incentives, we talk a lot about like some organizations don't have money, and like some organizations legally aren't allowed, in the US at least, legally aren't allowed to incentivize participation, so like they can't do money. So it's like, can you do like, I've worked with a couple companies where I'm like, can you give people a discount, or can you give someone like, I don't know, like a free training session, right? Like, are there other ways you can like give someone something for their time? And then again, like I think the clear share out is really like, to me, that's the most valuable. If people see that you actually took feedback and did something with it, now suddenly it's like, oh, like I should give feedback next time because I really want to keep this feature, or I really want this thing changed. Like I didn't think they were ever gonna do anything about it, so I didn't weigh in, but like now I wish I had, right? I think that
Mhm.
reporting piece is just so important because people are over surveyed. People get sent so many surveys and
Mhm.
never hear from them again. I can't actually remember the last time I was followed up with at all based on any survey I've taken. And I take hundreds just for fun. I take them because I'm like, I want to see how people are asking things. I never hear anything else about them. American Express and Discover, credit card companies, like, oh my God, they survey me like once or twice a week. And it's like, you have all this feedback. Like, what are you doing with it? Right? It's like, it would go so
Mhm.
far to just be like, oh, and like, we decided to like change this feature because everyone thought it sucked and did it differently. And I'd be like, oh, like that's cool that they actually listened. Like next time I see a survey, I should keep an eye on it. Um, Also, honestly, like deadlines and urgency is helpful. Um,
Mhm.
I have one client who wanted to give, this was, I thought was wild. I'd never had such a short turnaround, but they wanted to give people 3 days to take the survey. and they were like, they were surveying a bunch of startup founders, and they were like, we're only going to give them 3 days because if we give them a week, I don't know. They're like, we'll take a week, but if we say like this is like send it out on Wednesday and it's due Friday, like it's going to increase responses because they're just going to know they have to get it done. So I think thinking strategically on the flip side of that, like when you work with schools, you often have to give them like 3 to 5 months to complete something, right? Because everyone's so busy and like thinking about when you're sending a survey, like don't survey accountants in the middle of tax season. You know what I mean? Like there are just some things where you can set yourself up for success because you're choosing good times and like being strategic about the window of time. I also talk a lot about like soft closes where I'm like, hey, like the survey's open for 2 weeks, like get your feedback in by Friday. But internally, we know, okay, if we keep it open for another 1 week or 2 weeks, that's okay. So then on the day that everyone thinks it's due, we can target people who haven't responded and be like, hey, actually, like it's open for longer. So I think there's a lot of like strategic operational things that you can do to get more responses.
Thank you, Kirsten. Do you see, is there interest from participants with respect to seeing the collective wisdom or the collective feedback or what others are doing? Are they curious enough to see it? Is that a motivation also?
I think so. I think that people like you're asking a question because you think it's so important. And I think people would be curious to know like what is the overall consensus, right?
Mhm.
I think transparency, especially in today's day and age, goes a long way, right? So to be like, to know this is how I responded, here's how everyone else responded could just be really fascinating and also help explain company decisions, right? Because you're also faced with the thing where if I tell you I really want this feature and you don't add that feature, it would be good for me to know that you didn't add it because I was the only one who wanted it out of like 1,000 people, right?
Got
So it's kind of again like cultivating that relationship because I always tell people on surveys, like, don't ask something that you're like not prepared to change or that you can't change. You know what I mean? Because sometimes people will be like, is there anything we could do differently? And I'm like, do you plan on doing something differently? Because if you don't plan on doing something differently, do not ask that question because asking things like that sets the expectation that something's going to change or that you're going to do something differently. So I think it's always nice to put yourself in a position where it's like, you're not burning bridges with anyone, right? Because you're just like, hey, like this wasn't the most popular thing. You know what I mean? Like,
it.
if you really want to change, like better go find some more of your friends to like vote for this, right? Because it just didn't win out. But I think that's helpful because then people still know that they were heard. And it's like, and that just wasn't like the consensus, which is different than people being like, oh, I bet they didn't even like look at my thing.
Thank you, Kirsten. So probably we can take one more question. Anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question, feel free to go ahead. We've got about another 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Kirsten, we wanted to hear from you with respect to how are you extending this book? I know you have launched it, so I've seen there are some good reviews. I saw in
Mm.
LinkedIn the other day someone wrote about your book. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, just wanted to hear how are you developing this further? Is there a new book
Yeah.
coming in?
Yeah. So I was really excited. This book hit. So I self-published because I didn't want an editor making me say things I didn't want to say. So I self-published the book and it's been on the top seller, like bestseller, top 100 sellers on Amazon a few times, which has been really exciting just because it's like a small, like indie author. That was pretty cool. It just came out in September, so it's coming up on its like 1 year anniversary. I have a second book in the works. And honestly, I've been thinking about I'm like, oh man, when would I do another version of this book? But I think in probably a couple of years, I would want to update the examples. Like to me, I'm like, even a year out, I'm like, same advice. Like, this is like the process I would recommend, but I think like doing future versions with like more examples, expanded examples, and just like updating them as things change will be helpful. So I'm excited to do that. But also, as I mentioned, like I have a newsletter, and every week I kind of like basically write a new chapter of this book every week on my newsletter just to keep educating people about this. My hope is that like it's getting used by a few schools here in the US for students, and I think that that's like a good entry point for it. There's been a few companies that are using it for their like customer research teams and like buying it for the whole team and having them educate that way. So I'm kind of just excited to see how it like organically goes out there. I never did like a big marketing. I'm not really a big showy marketing type person, so I was more like, "Hey, I have this book. Like, hope some people read it." So it's been exciting to see that people are reading it and using it, and people that I haven't even. I got an email from a company, and I was like, "I didn't even know you knew who I was. Like, that's so cool that you are using this book." So it's been exciting to see how it goes, and I'm definitely eager to keep it up to date. For me, I'm like, I think the advice is timeless. I could see addendums for bits on AI because that really has like exploded in terms of like its people using it. But core advice, I'm like, I don't see the core advice changing. Like, I think this is how
True.
how
Yeah.
how they should go.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's very true. I think the instructions in the book are really timeless. I think these are foundations for anyone who hasn't done research before, if they wanted to get started. I think
Yeah,
great book to get started at this cost. I think it's a super. I'd say it's a steal for anyone who gets started with surveys. It's a
yeah,
must read. And thank you for writing, and it's a very insightful book, and I learned a lot from this book with respect to reviewing surveys, where when customers send surveys to us, how can we review it
yeah.
better, and we can give them feedback. So we learned a lot of ideas from your book, Kirsten. Super helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Kirsten, I just want to hear from you with respect to how can members from the community follow you.
Yeah.
I know your newsletter is great. I think I get a week after week really great insights, bites of information on how not to do a survey, and
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I think it's helpful as well. If you could share your newsletter as well as your website, members from the community
Yeah.
can follow you.
Let me put my web. So if you scroll to the very bottom of my website, it has my newsletter, but it also has links to like my LinkedIn. If you're on TikTok, I make a lot of TikTok videos about survey design, and I think they're entertaining. So like really anywhere there is social media, you can find me talking about survey examples. Um, and like how to do questions better. Sometimes they go a little bit more broad into how to do research because obviously surveys are a subset of research, but yeah, I would love to keep up with you all there. And I have when you join my Substack, you actually get a template for onboarding and offboarding surveys um, that's mocked up. And I also put together like an example of like new like question makeovers. There's one for businesses and there's one for nonprofits. So when you join the newsletter, it's free to join, but when you sign up for the newsletter, you get sent those tools that I think are good. I think it's important for people to have access to more like a free and affordable resources to good survey design because the way I look at it is I'm like, people are going to do it anyways. Like, I'd rather them do it well.
Mhm. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah.
We're coming to a close, Kirsten. Thank you so much for sharing your book with us today. I know certainly the insights on how to design the survey using the five simple steps, what you cover in the part one, then also how to report those findings with the goals you measure is were incredibly helpful. So when I read through, so I recommend everyone in the audience, also our community, to pick up your book, and we're also giving away 10 free books to our community. Thanks for joining us, Kirsten. We appreciate your time and look forward to applying what we have learned in the next survey project. Thank you for teaching.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. See you.